Kit Baxter lived on the outskirts of an unexceptional town called Dunsfield, where the biggest excitement was typically the weekly discount on fried chicken at the local diner. Kit, however, was anything but ordinary. A wiry, wild-haired tinkerer with mismatched socks, Kit adored inventing contraptions that nobody had asked for but that fascinated anyone who dared step into the cluttered workshop. The workshop itself was a testament to chaos, gears resting on crumpled blueprints, wires poking out of half-built robots, and a half-eaten slice of pizza from who knew when laying on top of a set of screwdrivers. One blisteringly hot summer afternoon, Kit had a brilliant, if you could call it that, idea. With sweat trickling from a brow perpetually framed by a bizarre pair of welding goggles, Kit declared, "I've got it! Rocket-powered roller skates! They'll be unstoppable!" Literally, no one was present to hear the dramatic proclamation, of course. Kit was home alone, as usual, muttering away to an audience of battered tools. It wasn't the first time Kit had attempted something arguably unwise. Past fiascos included a toaster that also functioned as a shortwave radio, the cross signals made breakfast rather loud, self-tying shoelaces that spontaneously tightened throughout the day, and an umbrella that served as a portable barbecue grill. Still, rocket-powered skates were a new frontier. Kit was determined to push scientific boundaries or rocket blast them into oblivion. The labor of creation spanned 3 nights of feverish activity. Kit's workshop became a beehive of frenzied construction. Sparks from the welder occasionally singed the inventor's clothes, but Kit pressed on. The contraption, in its finished state, if finished was the appropriate word, looked like standard roller skates with cylinders strapped on each side. Each cylinder had vents allowing for thrust control, or at least that was the theory. Kit had proudly welded purpose-built rocket nozzles to each skate. Upon completion, the inventor stepped back and brushed swirls of metal dust from the baggy overalls. "There," declared Kit, eyes gleaming with triumph. "The unstoppable roller skates. I'll call them Velocity Vortex Mark I." A few finishing touches remained. Kit rummaged through a chest labeled "Various Buttons and Switches," eventually fishing out a large red button that read, "Activate." Where that button had come from was unknown. Its bright sheen suggested it once belonged to an industrial press or a missile launch console from some museum exhibit. Nonetheless, it was perfect. Kit installed it on the right skate, tested the pressing mechanism a few times, and nodded with delight. Later that afternoon, after downing a mug of coffee and an entire bag of licorice, Kit was ready to test the contraption. Stepping outside, the inventor was greeted by the scorching sunshine and an audience of none. That was precisely how Kit liked to attempt new stunts. Less chance of witnesses in the event of catastrophic failure. With a confident grin, Kit strapped on the glossy rocket skates, tightened the laces, and winced at the thought of potential explosion. "All right, old buddies, let's defy gravity. Or skate across it, I guess." It all started raw and clumsy. The moment Kit pressed the large red button, the rocket thrusters fired with a sudden, heart-stopping roar. Instantly, the inventor lurched forward across the yard, arms flailing. A wheel struck a large stone, launching the skates into a brief airborne cameo before slamming back onto the grassy ground. The rockets, though, continued to propel the skates with unstoppable vigor. Kit shot off like a drill bit across a plank of wood. And, oh no, wait, stop, stop. Kit's voice reverberated as movement accelerated. It quickly became evident that in the design's brilliance, Kit had forgotten an essential feature, an off switch. The thrusters were not designed to shut down until they ran out of fuel, which Kit had calculated would take about half an hour. It was an impressive duration for rocket-powered footwear, or catastrophically long if you needed to not be moving. In a panic, Kit tried to stand upright to control the direction of the blasts, but the vibrations rattled the inventor's knees. The rocket jets propelled the skates faster and faster, turning Kit's yard into a comedic blur of green. Desperate attempts to slow down involved scuffing the heels on the ground, but that only created sparks. Shouts of "Wow, wow, wow!" filled the otherwise quiet day. Kit zipped from the backyard onto the street. A dog walker, Miss Prudence Farnsworth, nearly lost her hold on her dachshund's leash. What in tarnation, she gasped, stepping aside just in time as Kit whirled past, arms windmilling. The dog, a startled creature named Tuba, decided to chase the new mechanical squealing phenomenon, barking at the top of its lungs. But Kit and the rocket skates were already halfway down the block. The rest of the neighborhood, used to the inventor's unusual activities, hardly batted an eyelash when they heard the roar. Mr. Gideon, who sat on his porch whittling figurines, glanced up at the screaming, rocket-distressed figure. He calmly commented, to no one in particular, "Kit's out there testing a new whatchamacallit again." Any further conversation was lost to the wind as Kit passed, shouting, "Call the fire department," before disappearing around a corner. That first corner had a dreaded speed bump. As soon as Kit hit it, the skates lifted off the asphalt for a brief, glorious second. Mid-slight, Kit realized with mild horror that the momentum was unstoppable. Down the street, there was a portable fruit stand run by a local orchard caretaker, Drusilla McNabb. Raven-haired Drusilla was happily polishing apples when she saw Kit flying right at her with the unwavering determination of a misguided comet. Panicked, Drusilla ducked behind her cart. With a thunderous crash, Kit smacked the edge of the fruit stand, causing apples to burst in every direction. The inventor spun around in a kaleidoscope of color, apple chunks and rocket smoke. Unbelievably, the wheels stayed aligned, and Kit landed back on the asphalt. Drusilla emerged in disbelief, an apple lodged in her hair. "Kit Baxter, watch where you're going," she hollered, waving a spatula in indignation. Yet, there was scarcely time for pleasantries or apologies as the rockets continued to propel Kit straight down the street. Meanwhile, Tuba the dachshund persisted in chasing the bizarre scene, weaving around Drusilla's spilled apples and howling in canine disapproval. Several neighbors joined the chase out of uncontainable curiosity. Drusilla, determined for vengeance over her battered apples, hopped on her battered mohit and revved it up to follow. Soon an entire parade formed. Tuba the dachshund, Drusilla on a sputtering scooter, Miss Prudence Farnsworth hobbling at full speed, and a gaggle of local kids on bicycles all trailing Kit. In the midst of the mayhem, Kit tried to regain composure. Think, the inventor muttered. The rocket-fueled speed made it hard to do anything but flail. The wind roared in Kit's ears. Sunglasses previously perched on the inventor's forehead flew off. A swirl of duct tape erupted from Kit's pockets, unraveling in midair with comedic flair. Rational thought was overshadowed by the repeated notion, "I really should have planned an emergency brake system." Approaching the main intersection of Dunsfield, Kit realized that an unsuspecting crowd had gathered, possibly on lunch breaks. There was a crossing guard named Irving who prided himself on the seriousness of his job. He wore an immaculate uniform and sunglasses like a traffic police officer, even though all he did was ensure nobody jaywalked. Spotting the ballistic form of Kit, Irving stepped out, blew his whistle, and waved the stop sign. Kit's shrieks drowned out the whistle as the inventor careened across the intersection, ignoring all traffic signals. Cars honked wildly as the chase brigade of neighbors followed. Irving spun around in alarm, trying to figure out whether to keep crossing the few pedestrians who seemed equally baffled. The line of chasees and chasers left a swirl of dust in their wake. "I need a plan," Kit gasped. Twisting around, the inventor realized the rocket boosters had a sliding lever that was originally meant to modulate speed. But the lever had jammed in place, quite possibly from the apple collision. Speed was now locked at maximum. Meanwhile, the chase gained a new participant, the local news reporter, Ebony Fisk. Her comedic sense tingled whenever Kit Baxter was up to a new invention. She hopped on her news van's passenger side and clung out the window with a camera, instructing her driver, "Follow that swirling cloud of rocket smoke." Ebony wanted the scoop for the evening broadcast. As the inventor thundered toward the outskirts of Dunsfield, the road started inclining downward. Kit gulped. Gravity plus rockets was a horrifying equation. The velocity doubled, making the wind noise scream in the inventor's ears. Kit's eyes watered. A quick glance behind revealed the entire crowd, now a half-mile back, looking more like a gaggle of dust specks. But Ebony's news van was creeping near, the lens of the camera capturing every second of the fiasco. "Madcap Inventor on the run!" Ebony shouted into her microphone. We bring you live coverage of the dramatic and comedic pursuit. Her hair whipped around in the wind so violently that half of it looked like a nest for outraged pigeons. Kit turned to face forward and gasped. Ahead lay a cluster of road signs warning of a major construction site. Orange cones dotted the road, and a single bulldozer crawled across the path. There was no time to slow down. The rocket skate soared past the bulldozer, rattling the machine's operator. A small sign that read Detour flapped helplessly as Kit blew by. The bulldozer driver spat out a mouthful of coffee in shock. The sidewalk ended, replaced by gravel leading to a wide-open field. In a bizarre stroke of luck, or fate, or comedic inevitability, Kit's trajectory continued into a park area dotted with footpaths and the occasional oak tree. The madness quieted for a moment as the rolling wheels slid from gravel to grass, creating a hissing friction that slowed the speed. Finally, Kit could breathe. The sudden jolt from asphalt to uneven terrain forced the inventor's legs to wobble precariously, and the rocket thrusters spurted and whipped with diminishing fuel. Kit exclaimed, "Yes, I'm slowing down!" But relief came too soon. The forward momentum was still unstoppable, and the field was not entirely empty. A lake shimmered nearby, complete with canoes and a handful of Sunday picnickers who had come out on a weekday precisely for the calm. So much for that plan. A boy flying a kite saw Kit approaching at an odd angle and scrambled out of the way. Two picnickers abandoned their meal, plates and all, diving behind a bush as the unstoppable inventor whizzed by. A goose waddled honking across the grass, nearly colliding with the rocket skates, but pivoting away at the last second. The resulting swirl of feathers made Kit cough. The ephemeral lull ended as the skates bounced across a rocky patch near the lake's edge. With each bounce came a shriek, both from Kit and from the unsuspecting onlookers. It became a carnival ride from which Kit could not escape. This is it. I'll end up in the lake strapped to rocket skates, Kit thought. The inventor eyed a small footbridge crossing the water, but the angle was not so favorable. Despite best efforts to steer, the rocket skates refused to yield. Kit soared across the footbridge at such high speed that the planks rattled, nearly launching the inventor headfirst into the water. The momentum carried Kit clear to the other side, accompanied by screaming geese, a flabbergasted fisherman, and Ebony's news van, which had circled around to the park entrance. Gardeners, strollers, and dog walkers scattered like spooked pigeons. Chaos reigned. Then, just as the last bit of rocket fuel was about to expire, just when the contraption's roar was diminishing to a splutter, the wheels caught an exposed tree root. Kit's shriek soared to a new octave. The skates lurched. Kit's forward momentum continued, but the skates got momentumly wedged in the root. For an instant, all the kinetic energy transferred to Kit's upper body, flinging the inventor forward like a sack of laundry launched from a catapult. A split second later, the rocket boosters coughed out their final blasts, dislodging themselves from the root, and both feet soared upward. Kit soared in an arc, eyes wide, arms flailing like a graceless trapeze artist. The laws of physics were unkind but consistent. Kit crashed into a bank of densely packed bushes with a glorious rustling of leaves and a single comedic squawk from a hidden bird. Was all Kit could manage before landing face first in the dirt. Finally, everything was still, except for a small squeal of steam from one of the rocket nozzles. The unstoppable ride was over. The chase brigade arrived in a muddled wave of people, panting and bewildered. Tuba barked triumphantly at the bush, as if proclaiming victory over some foreign invader. Drusilla, sweaty and sticky from the fruit stand fiasco, dismounted her scooter. Prudence Farnsworth scolded Tuba for wandering so far. The random children on their bikes, enthralled by the spectacle, pointed and giggled. Ebony Fisk stepped out of her news van and trotted closer with her microphone, enthralled by the story she had captured. She was already rehearsing her sensational headline, "Local Inventors Rocket Skate Rampage." Eventually, one brave onlooker parted the leaves to find Kit, battered but alive, spitting out twigs. The rocket skates were somehow still attached. By now, smoke poured in a lazy spiral from each thruster, the last remnants of fuel burning off. "All right," Kit muttered, pushing twigs out of a wild nest of hair. "Not the smoothest demonstration, but still some success, right?" This optimistic perspective earned a skeptical glance from Drusilla, who still had apple remnants clinging to her clothes. Success? You nearly destroyed my fruit stand, Drusilla cried, exasperation dripping from her voice. You also disrupted half the town, Ebony said, adjusting her microphone. She peered expectantly at Kit, always on the lookout for a clever quote. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Kit grimaced, tested a bruised ankle, and poked at the rocket boosters to ensure they were truly empty. Well, next version. I'll remember an off switch. The entire crowd groaned. Tuba barked. A few hours later, with adrenaline still coursing, Kit found a moment alone in the workshop. Miraculously, no one had pressed charges yet, though Drusilla had demanded a fresh supply of apples. The inventor hopped on a stool, penning furious notes about a new blueprint. The fiasco was soon the talk of Dunsfield. Ebony's news coverage was comedic gold, especially the slow-motion replay of Kit hitting that apple stand. Town residents were torn between condemnation and fascination. Kids started gluing tin cans to their sneakers, imagining they could replicate Kit's adventure. Local officials politely asked Kit to apply for a special engineering permit in the future, but Kit had no intention of giving up. For one thing, the memory of that unstoppable, out-of-control sensation still haunted the inventor's dreams. For another, Kit simply refused to let an idea remain flawed. I'll fix you, Velocity Vortex Mark II, the inventor muttered at the battered skates, which rested on a workbench. The metal had been singed, the paint job scratched, but to Kit's mind, they were salvageable. Few days passed before Kit reemerged, brandishing a second version of the rocket skates. The new changes included a massive lever labeled Thrust Control, a kill switch that was bright green, and smaller thrusters on each skate. Kit had also installed an experimental stability booster that used gyroscopic tech to keep the user upright. Now, Kit proclaimed to a battered cardboard box, we test again, but carefully this time. The next day, out in the backyard again, Kit placed orange cones around a makeshift track. The plan was to do a quick test at low speed, just to confirm that the kill switch truly worked. Kit donned a well-worn helmet and strapped the second iteration of rocket skates in place, double-checking the laces and flicking the goggles into position. Carefully, the inventor tapped the large red button. The rockets hissed to life, but this time, the noise was more subdued. Fantastic, Kit grinned. I can keep the speed low. The inventor glided forward around the cones, giving each a wide berth. So smooth. This was the triumph of science. Kit pressed the brake switch and the skate slowed elegantly. In a crowning moment of relief, the kill switch turned everything off. Kit leapt up in celebration. No bruises, no involuntary flight. It was at that very moment that Ebony Fisk appeared, camera in hand. She had felt certain that Kit would attempt another rocket demonstration. Journalistic instincts had not failed her. Well, seems like you're more in control this time around, she said, a note of disappointment in her voice. Probably less comedic footage, she thought. Kit waved politely. Yep, safer than ever. I just need more speed data to finalize. The inventor cut short, seeing something that Ebony had not. Tuba, the dachshund, racing into the yard. Tuba, apparently having scented the leftover licorice in Kit's pocket, had barreled straight for the imaginary treat. Startled, Kit stepped back, inadvertently slapping the large red button to full throttle. The thrusters roared with unexpected might. On top of that, the new stability booster engaged, trying to keep the inventor upright, which only caused a bizarre rubber banding motion. The net effect was catastrophic. Kit rocketed forward, skipping the orange cones entirely and barreling toward Ebony. With a desperate shriek, Ebony dove behind a trash can, narrowly avoiding the collision. Her camera tumbled to the grass. Again? She hollered, voice gravelly with panic. Kit tried to regain composure, but the speed soared. As the thrusters reminisced about the unstoppable days of old, they seemed to have found their primal calling, to blast at full tilt. The kill switch sat on the left skate, but Kit's frantic flailing made it impossible to hit. Again, Kit tore through the fence gate, snapping it off its hinges. I just fixed that fence, came a neighbor's shout. In the street, a passing mail carrier screeched to a halt, scattering letters across the asphalt. Kit soared by, shoes blazing with rocket fury. Ebony, ever the dedicated reporter, hastened to retrieve her camera before sprinting after the quickly vanishing figure. Thus began round 2 of unstoppable rocket mania. This time, though, Kit managed to hold some semblance of a stance, leaning into the turns. A quick swerve around Miss Prudence Farnsworth's front flower pot saved a crash, though the wake of rocket exhaust left the daffodils drooping, half-scorched. Down the block, Kit whipped around Mr. Gideon's porch. He nodded calmly, whittling once more and muttering, "Kit again, is it?" "Dory!" Kit shouted, swirling around, trying to find a line of escape. The memory of the last fiasco was still fresh. The best bet was an open area where the inventor could attempt a kill switch maneuver or let the thrusters run out. Then, an idea sprouted. The park had too many obstacles, but there was a wide clearing by the old Jenkins farmland just beyond city limits. If Kit could reach it, perhaps the rocket fuel would burn out safely, or the inventor might have enough time to physically hit the kill switch. Kit turned a corner with improbable grace. Heading for open country roads, Ebony followed in her news van, precariously filming out the window, zooming in on the speeding figure. She could already imagine the headlines. "Second rocket skate rampage, Baxter strikes again." Soon, the neighborhood roads turned to farmland. Fences and wide fields replaced houses. A row of cows blinked lazily, chewing cud, unimpressed by the roaring rocket skates slicing through the dusty road. Kit gained confidence in steering and angled both feet together. With a deep exhale, the inventor attempted a quick glance at the kill switch button. But every time Kit leaned down, the resulting shift in weight threatened to send the inventor flying sideways. Attempting to toggle the kill switch while balancing on rocket skates, not for the faint of heart. At last, the farmland opened up, revealing a vast field dotted with hay bales and an old barn at the far end. Kit recognized it as Jenkins's old property. No one lived there now. Monsieur Jonkin had retired, leaving the farmland mostly abandoned. Kit angled for a gap in the fence. Hop! Over the rickety boards went the unstoppable inventor, praying that the wheels didn't catch. It was a bumpy landing, but the wide field provided a relatively safe space. Ebony's news van rumbled down a parallel dirt road, capturing the entire spectacle. The rocket boosters spat out a scorching wave of heat as they devoured the last reserves of fuel, but that wouldn't last much longer. With one final push, Kit managed to bend down and flick the kill switch. The rockets whined, sputtered, and finally fell silent. Momentum carried Kit forward several meters until Friction 1, bringing the inventor's wild ride to a precarious stop in a patch of tall grass. Kit exhaled, heart hammering. For a moment, there was no sound except the quiet hiss of venting steam and the rustling of the grass in the breeze. The Unstoppable had at last been stopped. Ebony arrived shortly thereafter, camera rolling. She hopped out of the van and advanced, half laughing, half out of breath. "The kill switch. Are you okay?" Kit nearly collapsed from relief, not even bothered by the grass stains or the singed trouser cuffs. "I'm alive," the inventor said, panting. "And the kill switch finally worked." Ebony smirked. "So, are you going to scrap the rocket skates now?" Kit studied the battered contraption. The protective shells were cracked, the once stylish paint was blackened by soot, and the friction had worn down the wheels to pitiful nubs. No, the inventor answered. "They just need further improvements. Or, a safer ignition system." "Unbelievable," Ebony said in mock exasperation. After filming a few more shots, she gently asked, "Should I give you a ride back to town?" Kit, exhausted but still enthusiastic, nodded. "Yes, please." Gathering the battered skates, the inventor waddled to Ebony's van. The ride back to Dunsfield was mercifully calm, though Ebony peppered the entire journey with questions that Kit answered with a mixture of pride and sheepishness. By the time they arrived at the workshop, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in deep oranges and reds. Ebony, satisfied with her story, parted ways to compile her next sensational news segment. Before she left, she turned back and offered Kit a quick thumbs up. Ends for the excitement as always. Kit, left alone, gazed at the dented rocket skates and sighed. "Maybe I should invent something simpler next time," the inventor mused. like a self-walking dog leash or an umbrella that does your taxes. Then a grin spread across Kit's face. Nah, rocket skates are too much fun. With a mischievous twinkle in the eye, Kit opened a blank notebook. The new plan was for the Velocity Vortex Mark III, complete with enhanced thrust algorithms, shock absorption, flame-resistant armor, and a bigger, greener kill switch that practically glowed in the dark. And so ended, or began anew, the saga of the unstoppable skates and their enthusiastic, if occasionally bruised and battered inventor. Word spread quickly through Dunsfield that another test might happen. Folks wondered if they should stage an official event. Barriers, paramedics, the local marching band, the whole shebang, to contain the madness before it lit up the quiet streets yet again. But one thing was certain. Whether unstoppable or somewhat stoppable, Kit Baxter's rocket skates promised Dunsfield more excitement than it had seen in decades. Meanwhile, Tuba the dachshund sniffed around the yard in search of that licorice, entirely unaware that he had in a small way contributed to the day's comedic chaos. Drusilla McNabb considered adopting additional insurance for her fruit cart just in case. Irving, the crossing guard, practiced more dramatic whistle blows, and Ebony, for her part, readied her camera for whatever outlandish invention Kit concocted next. In the end, as day turned to night, Kit sat in the cluttered workshop taking inventory of bruises and exhaustion. The rocket skates lay on the floor, smoldering faintly, as if offering a final exhalation of spent adrenaline. Despite the chaos, the crashes, and the insane chase around town, Kit grinned. The unstoppable spirit of invention was alive and well. After all, it was only by daring to test the boundaries and sometimes forgetting to install an off switch that true innovation happened. Just maybe, though, next time Kit would remember to double-check that everything actually could switch off before hitting the big red button. But that level of caution might have to wait for Mark III. Until then, the unstoppable skates would rest, brimming with potential for the next comedic escapade.